Thomas Nagel, who is a leading philosopher of mind in the United States, New York University, in one of his books, he said that a naturalist worldview, a Darwinian perspective understanding reality has totally failed to provide an explanation of consciousness.
As we come to the conclusion of this phenomenal podcast, I just want us to look at one particular statement that a cosmologist who is part of a very prominent atheistic team here in India said. So this was within a WhatsApp chat, and he shared about Sir Roger Penrose's work on assimilating consciousness into physics by means of quantum consciousness. And he was writing, and towards the end, he was very confident that physics will definitely explain consciousness. And he went on to conclude that the domain of consciousness, the talk of consciousness, is no longer the monopoly of philosophy, and that it is the final nail in the coffin for the already dead field of philosophy. Now, that's a lot of blunder released in a few words. And you addressed one of it when Stephen Hawking said that philosophy is dead. But here he went on to say so many things. He has so many assumptions about how philosophy really works in terms of engaging with the idea of consciousness, and also the notion that philosophy is dead, and somehow Sir Roger Penrose's work, therefore, is the final nail in the coffin. What would be your response to it?
Yeah. Well, again, I think sometimes it's kind of a glaring a lack of awareness of the nature of philosophy and science itself. I mean, Thomas Nagel, who is a leading philosopher of mind in the United States, New York University, in one of his books, he said that a naturalist worldview, a Darwinian perspective understanding reality has totally failed to provide an explanation of consciousness. I mean, what is consciousness? I think that is, certainly there are scientific implications. We look at the brain, we look at the neurons, we look at how the brain itself works, but it also is loaded with philosophical implications. Consciousness means that we are self-conscious. It means that we have this aboutness. We can think about particular things. So I think to reduce consciousness to merely a scientific question is glaringly unaware. And I would say that even secular people who are experts, either philosophers of mind or neuroscientists, I think they have come to the conclusion that trying to explain consciousness is very, very difficult. Nagel takes the point. Now, Nagel is an atheist, but he says there is no good naturalistic explanation, either reductionism or emergent properties. Nagel takes the point that to explain consciousness, you must begin with it. So he adopts panpsychism. I think that's a concession that consciousness is so difficult to explain, it's easier to begin with it. Now, from a theistic point of view, if God is an infinite, eternal mind, it's not hard to think that he might create finite minds that are conscious. So I'm not impressed with that statement that somehow consciousness is the nail in the coffin to get rid of philosophy.
And also the hidden assumption is that philosophy is already dead. It's done and dusted. And now consciousness is going to be explained by the field of science and physics. So therefore, philosophy can do absolutely nothing there. And I believe that as the audience tune into our dialogue, that they will come to see that philosophy is not merely thinking about random stuff and making random claims, but it is a huge tool that is used and that overrides often most of the claims that science make. As you pointed out, the field of philosophy of science is a very good example about how philosophy is foundational to how we think, why we think, the way we think. Is our thinking good? Is it rational? Is it well enough to lead us to conclusions? And also, most importantly, is my thinking good enough to make good conclusions from the empirical data before me?